Good morning, Richard Fulmer here. Welcome to another edition of Richard's Rock Rambles. How's everybody doing out there? You're in Cape Town, the birds are singing, the sun is shining, and the liquor stores are open, it's all good. So enough of that, let's get into the important stuff, the music. So today we're going to have a look at another prog rock band, and I think these guys were in the forefront of the whole British prog rock movement of the late 60s and early 70s. In fact, this band could probably be called the very first supergroup within the prog rock genre. So who am I waffling on about? Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Three guys who decided to use their surnames as the name of the band. They all came from already established bands. Keith Emerson on keyboards, Hammond organ, Moog synthesizers. Later on, he would have a whole bunch of different synthesizers, but in the early days, it was basically just the Hammond organ and a couple of synths. And he was of the band called The Nice before Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Then you had Greg Lake on vocals, bass, and guitar. He, of course, was with King Crimson. Then on drums, eventually they got Carl Palmer after trying a few drummers, and that didn't quite work out. They got hold of Carl Palmer. And he, of course, had been with the Crazy World of Arthur Brown, as well as Atomic Rooster, another pretty well-established rock band in England in the early 70s. So there we have it, the three guys that make up Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They formed in London in 1970. So, yeah, going way back. Not many albums to chat about. There were 10 studio albums. I don't have all of them, but I have the ones that I think make up the... it will show you the best of what they could do, especially those early 70s ones. So there's 10 studio albums. There's a couple of live albums. And as I say, there were a few that I don't have, the 80s, and I think then they reformed towards the end, and they called it Emerson, Lake and Powell when Carl Palmer had left, so they still kept the ELP. They made one album called, I think it was just called Emerson, Lake and Powell. It was self-titled, didn't do much. It wasn't as good as the early stuff. So let's get stuck into the album, shall we? And we start off with the self-titled Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Amazing keyboard work on here, as one would come to expect from Keith Emerson. Great vocals and bass work from Greg Lake. He had a really unique voice. In fact, if you listen to the first King Crimson, in the Court of the Crimson King, his vocals on that track and on Epitaph and on 21st Schizoid Man, that he was a big part of that band, and he brought a lot to the table with Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So here we have The Barbarian, Take a Pebble, which is 12 minutes long, Knife Edge, Side 2, The Three Fates, which is also 3 different sections, piano solo, piano trio, Tank, and Lucky Man, which was a hit off this album, featuring Greg Lake on vocals. Amazing voice, as I said. So this came out in 1970. Produced, Greg Lake was in the production, Eddie Offord was an engineer. I think he also engineered quite a few of those early 70s rock albums. So that's the debut, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, one to check out. Then we move on to, I think this was in 1971, the album called Tarcus. Kind of a weird cover there, or quite what one would call it. But nevertheless, the music was amazing. Title track, Tarcus, Eruption, Stone of Years. A lot of these tracks had different parts to them, so they were really interesting to get into. And I think their prog rock was a little different to groups like Yes, which were probably slightly more melodic, and to King Crimson, probably closest to King Crimson. Very bombastic, very in your face, upfront keyboards, obviously, because they didn't have a major lead guitarist. Aquatars, Infinite Space, A Time and a Place, Are You Ready, Eddie? Quite a strange track, The Only Way. So yeah, Keith Emerson on here, Hammond organ, church organ, piano, Celeste, Moog synthesizers, Greg Lake, vocals, bass, electric and acoustic guitar, and Carl Palmer, drums and assorted percussion. He wasn't just a basic drummer, this guy was all over the place on the kit. pretty much you could see that a guy like Carl Palmer was a big influence for somebody like Neil Peart from Rush, who I spoke about in the previous 3 episodes. So there we go, Tarcus, their second album. Then we move on to Pictures at an Exhibition, which was their version of Mussorgsky's famous classical piece. A lot of classical music influences in Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I'll show you what it looks like on the inside. It's quite cool. That's what I love about vinyl. You get all these nice inner sleeves. The Hut of Baba Yaga, Promenade, The Great Gates of Kiev, The Curse of Baba Yaga, The Sage, and The Gnome. Really interesting album. Intricate piano pieces, great keyboard work from Keith Emerson. Him, John Lord, Rick Wakeman, all those great keyboardists from the early 70s, and I think Keith Emerson was right up there. So there we go, Pictures at an Exhibition, another one to check out, definitely. Then we move on to the album called Trilogy. Also a favorite of mine. Let's just see what's inside here. There's the guys over there. And what do we have here? We have The Endless Enigma Part 1, Fugue, The Endless Enigma Part 2, The Sheriff, Hoedown, which is quite different for them, Trilogy, Livingston, and Aberdeen's Bolero. Hammond organ, Steinway piano, vocals, bass. These guys later on in the 70s, when they toured, they had a massive touring group, trucks full of stuff, especially going towards 77. You could see why the punk movement called them sort of past their sell-by dates and boring old farts. But trust me, when you went to go see an Emerson, Lake and Palmer concert in the mid to late 70s, it was anything but boring. But yeah, perhaps towards the end they did get a bit too self-indulgent, and hence we had the punk movement. The last studio album that I want to chat about is my favorite, Brain Salad Surgery, with that great H.R. Geiger cover. That artist had some really weird work, but I think it works with this album cover. And this is quite cool. If you open it up and you have the vinyl, it opens up like that. And there's the middle piece with the guys. Yeah, really cool stuff. And then if you open it even further, then if you'll be able to see this, you get the 3 guys: Carl Palmer, Keith Emerson, and Greg Lake. The magic of vinyl, something you're not going to get with CDs or with dreaded MP3s. So what do we have here as far as the tracks go? Let's just have a look. Expressions, the Carnival 9 is the amazing track on here. That's probably the best. Second Impression, Third Impression. As I say, very involved, lots of different pieces. Toccata, Still You Turn Me On, another great track. So yeah, this to me is them at their peak. As I said, they would go on to make a few other albums, but nothing compares to the early 70s. And for me, ending up with Brain Salad Surgery as the peak. The other ones they brought out, in 1977, they brought out Works Volumes 1 and 2. There was also a really great live album called Welcome Back, My Friends, to the Show That Never Ends. Then there was one called Love Beach from 78, which was really weak. I mean, it had the 3 guys standing on the cover of the album and it looked like something, an offshoot of the Beach Boys. It just didn't work for me. And then Black Moon in 1992, which was also okay-ish. And then, as I mentioned, Emerson, Lake and Powell from 1986. I think they did, their last concert together was in 2010, where they got, it was some big festival in England. Obviously a lot older, and that would be the last time that they played together. Keith Emerson sadly died in March 2016. He committed suicide, he shot himself, really sad. And then in the same year, in fact 9 months later, Greg Lake died from complications from cancer. So that leaves Carl Palmer as the only member of Emerson, Lake and Palmer still around. Of course, he went on to join Asia, and he's played with a number of other bands as well. So he still had success after leaving Emerson, Lake and Palmer. There are a couple of DVDs. The one I don't have that I really need to get hold of is the Emerson, Lake and Palmer Live at the Isle of Wight 1970. And if you think about it, that's the early days. And they put on such an amazing show. I mean, Keith Emerson was doing things with a Hammond B3, which is a large, heavy organ, throwing it around the stage, jumping over it. He used to stick knives in it. The whole 9 yards, because he probably thought, well, if Hendrix is going to go crazy with his guitar, because Hendrix was at the Isle of Wight as well, he thought, right, I'm going to do something with a Hammond B3. Greg Lake on vocals and guitar was great at that concert as well. And Carl Palmer was such an energetic drummer, really interesting time changes and what have you. Yeah, great stuff. So that's one I need to get hold of. The one I do have is from later on, Emerson, Lake and Palmer live in 1977. Also a good concert. This is in 26th of August 1977 at the Olympia Stadium, Montreal, Canada. And this was them right when they were in their excess days. Abaddon's Bolero, The Enemy God Dances with the Black Spirits, Carnival 9, which is really good on here. C'est la vie, that famous track that features Greg Lake on vocals. Lucky Man, Tank, Nut Rocker, Pirates, and Fanfare for the Common Man. Really good concert. And then last but not least, I want to mention a book. I'm not sure if this is still in print, but you should be able to get it. Greg Lake, Lucky Man, the autobiography. That's that one there. Interesting book. This came out just before his death in 2016, so they sort of had to add on a chapter or two at the end. That's Greg later on in life with his kid. Yeah, some great photographs in here as well. Pictures of Greg with other members of the band. There he is with Robert Fripp from King Crimson. Obviously, they were together in the early days in the Court of the Crimson King. See if you can get hold of that. Really worth checking out. So there we go. One of the founding prog rock bands from the UK. The UK had so many in those days. Different styles. I mean, you had Camel, who were very different. You had Emerson, Lake and Palmer, that were very bombastic. You had Yes, which incorporated a lot more sort of acoustic pieces and more melodic. Prog rock has got so much to offer. And I think Emerson, Lake and Palmer are definitely in the top 5 of the English prog rock bands from that era. So guys, hope you enjoyed that. Any comments, please put them down below. Like and subscribe, that'll be great. And yeah, have yourselves a really good week. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.